This is the Tom Bigby Tales, and I'm your host, Shannon Evans. I write about a small town in northeast Mississippi along the Tom Bigby River called Columbus. And sometimes I write about the rest of the state. This episode is about Hickory Sticks and its Valentine's ghost. Hickory Sticks is a 1.5-story wood frame home on North 7th Street in Columbus on a 3.5-acre wooded property. It faces what was once the old Hamilton Road, later called the Columbus Aberdeen Road. It has a lovely raised cottage style with a full gallery with 6 lovely columns. Originally, it was a log dog trot built in roughly 1815 to 1820. It was converted to a lovely expanded Greek revival about 1846 when Robert Hayden acquired the home. Hayden added a large, high-ceiling parlor, a front hall with a rising staircase, with a typical simple Greek revival stair rail, and a large finished second-floor room was added, along with proper 6/6 and 6/9 sash windows. The interior was plastered and the exterior was clad in clapboards. 4-panel doors were installed between rooms, and traditional plain Greek Revival mantels were installed over all the fireplaces. The steep sloping grounds were terraced, and brick steps and walkways were installed. Who built the original log structure Hayden improved? It is thought that Dr. Andrew Ware built the original structure before he officially owned the 160 acres of land the house originally sat on. Dr. Ware and his brother Adolphus obtained their official land grant sometime in 1834 or 1835. Dr. Ware and his brother came to Columbus from the Tidewater region of Virginia. Dr. Ware was the founding president of the Commercial Bank in Columbus. He sold the land to Hayden, who came to Columbus to survey the town from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Hayden served in the Alabama legislature. We were part of Alabama then, representing Monroe County in 1826, and later as the first clerk of Lowndes County when Columbus and surrounding regions were sectioned off from Monroe County to form its own county in 1830. In 1866, Hayden sold the property, which now consisted of only 33 acres, to a local judge, J.A. Orr. In 1879, former Confederate States of America General Stephen D. Lee purchased the home and acreage from Judge Orr. Lee had recently been elected a representative to the state legislature and would become president of Mississippi and A&M, now Mississippi State University, in 1880. This is a position he would hold until he was appointed part of the National Commission to organize the Vicksburg National Military Park in 1899. Lee remained in Hickory Sticks until his death in 1908, when his son Blewett Lee inherited the property. Blewett and his wife Frances Glessner Lee were living in Chicago, where Blewett was a professor and full-time railroad attorney. Blewett gave 11 acres of the property to the city of Columbus to build Lee Park. The home site, with the last 21 acres, remained a home until 1949, when Hickory Sticks and 3.5 acres were sold to Mr. and Mrs. Robert Ivy. Mrs. Fran Ivy and my mother became fast friends when Mother went to work at the local paper, the Commercial Dispatch. Miss Fran, or Mrs. Ivy as I referred to her, wrote a column for the paper, and she loved Mama and even tolerated me. She called me Little Miss Spitfire and Little Miss Tempest and her sassy teapot. Mrs. Ivy indulged my curiosity and my antics, much to my Mama's dismay. If Mama had a fire or crime to chase for the dispatch and no one available to keep an eye on me, Mrs. Ivy would take me home to help her whip something interesting up in the kitchen. Usually it meant drinking iced tea and eating homemade pimento cheese sandwiches with the crust cut off. while she answered a million phone calls. Those were fancy sandwiches. But on special days, when she had time to nibble on a sandwich and chat, I'd get her to tell me about her Valentine's ghost. Quote, my sister and I were sitting downstairs when we saw a man pass through the unopened front door and go up the stairs. He climbed up the stairs, went in the locked room upstairs, and I swear he sat on the bed and kicked off his boots. What did you do? Did y'all run up and check? I asked. I always loved a good ghost story. Oh, heavens, no. We were plumb scared. When Mr. Ivy came home, I told him. He went upstairs, looked around, and came back and said, you gals drank too much wine at the Valentine supper. We knew we hadn't, but he teased us about it forever. Until the next Valentine's rolled around, and we'd gone to bed and heard our visitor clunk up the stairs again. And so Mr. Ivy jumped out of that bed over in the front room over there and rushed up the stairs to see who was going up the stairs, only to hear the front door, the upstairs door slam shut, and someone sit on the upstairs bed in that same room. No, then what happened? I was thoroughly caught up in the story. Well, she continued, he ran upstairs and no one was there. The door was still wide open. Oh my God, I'd have been looking under the bed for him, I exclaimed. You'd have been scared, you silly goose, she said. Well, probably. I snagged a lemon bar and licked the powdered sugar off of it. My husband checked the entire house. No sign of a fellow anywhere. We didn't sleep a wink that night, she said. Who do you reckon your ghost is? I asked, spraying castor sugar everywhere. I think it's Mr. Hayden. He added the stairs in the upstairs room in the house. Mrs. Ivy refreshed our drinks. What does Valentine's Day have to do with Mr. Hayden? No clue, she said. My sister Elizabeth turned up to fetch me. On the way home, I told her the story Mrs. Ivy had shared. Oh my, Valentine's is next week, she said. We need to come back and see if we can see the ghost. Somehow Elizabeth convinced Mrs. Ivy to allow us, with two of her journalism friends who were also fellow ghost chasers, to come on Valentine's night and create a short movie and take some photos about the ghost, the stairs, and the log rooms of the home. I hung out with them until I got bored and then went in the living room to reread a comic book I had stuck in my jeans back pocket. Elizabeth and her pals walked in the room where I was sitting to change film in their cameras after a bit, and of course to discuss the next shot. The room got quiet for a minute, and we heard the front door open and shut, and the labored sounds of a heavy-booted person ascending the stairs. We all rushed the hall, but no one was there. Then the upstairs door to the log bedroom to the right snapped shut. The bed creaked loudly, and the distant sound of boots dropping in the floor were heard. We all raced upstairs to find boots, but there were none. We looked for a ghost, but there was no one there. We came back downstairs disappointed, but excited about what had just happened. Mrs. Ivy came in from the kitchen with a tray of cookies and steaming mugs of cocoa. Oh, I see you met Mr. Hayden, our Valentine's ghost. That was all she had to say on the subject. The house eventually was sold, and the Ivies have both passed on. The next owners were supposedly run out of the house by additional ghosts. The house sat vacant for several years, became overgrown, and a little bit decrepit. New owners are in there now doing lots of restoration work, including putting on a new front set of stairs and cleaning out thick brush away from the house. And I wonder if Mr. Hayden will visit them on their very first Valentine's Day in their lovely, new to them, antebellum home. I sure hope so. Thank you for coming on my podcast, The Tom Bigby Tales. Until next time.